who are tuning in tonight who will have submitted questions for our candidates. This is your opportunity to ask what you want to ask and to learn what you want to know about these finalists, their background, their plans, their vision for our division of police. We are fortunate to have with us this evening a distinguished member of the community who will pose your questions to the candidates and facilitate what I am confident will be an informative and engaging dialogue. Mo Wright is the president and CEO of Rama Consulting, which is based right here in Columbus. And he's worked with numerous groups and organizations over the years to achieve the kind of transformational change that moves progress and communities forward together. And that's precisely what we're looking to achieve in strong and steadfast partnership with our next chief of police. Mo, thank you for being here and for taking on the task this evening. I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome to all of our candidates, and welcome to all of my Columbus fellow residents. Mo Wright, again, coming to you live from Columbus City Hall, and I'm excited to moderate tonight's conversation and introduction of these four outstanding candidates to the Columbus community. Columbus is a great city. We all know that it's thriving in business, great sports and entertainment options, bustling neighborhoods with diverse populations, and yet we are not a perfect city. We've been challenged by issues like poverty and economic inequality, an emerging conversation about equity and what that means for all members of our community, and undoing decades of disparity and a community that is experiencing tension, mistrust, and uncertainty when it comes to our policing. The latter brings us to tonight's conversation. In recent months, the position of Columbus Chief of Police has been vacated during a time when the community is demanding greater accountability, transparency, and reform. Even while applauding much of the work our officers do to maintain public safety, our community recognizes the need for a new direction in how we think about and approach community policing. What is clear about all of this is that leadership matters, and we are excited to bring to you for your consideration and input four outstanding leaders who we know can make our city better and improve the state of our current police. Tonight, we welcome these four leaders to the community, and in just a moment, I'll introduce them to you individually. But first, a little bit about our process tonight. Over the last week, members of our community, both individuals and groups, have submitted over 150 questions that will be used to shape tonight's conversation. Those topics range everything from police and community relations, police reform and accountability, officer recruitment and training, and a number of other topics. While we can't get to every individual question tonight, the emerging themes from all those questions that were submitted have served as the basis for my question set tonight. The final question set is my own and has not been shared with the candidates in advance. Some questions will be posed to each of the candidates, and some will be tailored based on their individual background and experience to the candidates of our choice. You will get tonight an opportunity to listen to the perspectives of these decorated officers and their vision for leading the men and women of Columbus Police who are entrusted with serving our diverse community. With that, I want to allow just a moment to meet these four outstanding candidates. First, Elaine Bryant. Elaine is the Deputy Chief of Detroit Police Department and has been in law enforcement for over 21 years. She currently oversees the East Neighborhood Policing Bureau there in Detroit and has served as liaison between the faith-based community and the Detroit Police Department. She is currently responsible for creating and implementing community relations projects within the city of Detroit. Elaine, give everybody a wave in Columbus. Welcome to the conversation.
Hello, everyone.
Our next candidate, Mr. Derek Diggs. Derek is currently the police chief of Fort Myers, Florida, with over 44 years in law enforcement. One of his most promising accolades is he oversaw a 51% reduction in violent crime during his tenure as chief. He has established under his tenure a real-time crime center in Fort Myers when he took over as chief in 2016. His department has also been noted having obtained an advanced recertification from the National Accrediting and Professional Standards Organization, CALIA, in 2020, after a successful reform and reorganizational effort there in Fort Myers. Let's welcome Mr. Derek Diggs to our conversation.
Good evening, Columbus.
Thirdly, we welcome Mr. Avery Moore. Avery is currently the Assistant Chief of the Dallas Police Department with over 30 years in law enforcement. During his time, he has helped to improve the Dallas homicide rate and the clearance rate there by 22%. He's oversaw the planning and execution of protest-related events in the Dallas community. Mr. Moore was also commander of the SWAT unit in 2016 when 5 officers were killed and another 7 injured in an ambush attack that we all probably remember. Let's welcome Mr. Avery Moore to the conversation.
Good evening, family of Columbus.
And finally, Ms. Yvonne Roman, who is currently at the Center of Policing Equity with over 25 years in law enforcement. She is leading the 30 by 30 initiative to increase representation of police women in the U.S. by 30% by the year 2030. She helps police chiefs identify patterns of racial disparities in police practices across the country. And during her time as police chief in Newark, New Jersey, she negotiated the Newark Police Consent Decree with the United States Department of Justice. Please welcome Ms. Roman to the conversation this afternoon.
Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here, citizens of Columbus.
With that, before we jump into questions, we will entertain a 2-minute opening statement from each of the candidates. We will go in the order of introduction. Elaine Bryant, you now have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Honorable Mayor. I want to say honor to the mayor's staff, elected officials, Civilian Oversight Board, as well as the community and the men and women of blue who are watching this. It's an honor to be here. I'm very appreciative of this opportunity. I know that we talked about my community relations background, but I also want to focus on that I have a diverse background in my 21 years in law enforcement. I've overseen multiple aspects of a major police department, from the internal affairs unit all the way to major crimes, homicide, as well as other units. I have tactical metro experience. I also oversaw all the protests that happened last year in our city. We had 130 days of protests. So with that, I just want you to know that I am ready to serve. I am absolutely in a position to make change. I am a change agent, and I'm ready to get the job done. Thank you.
Thanks, Elaine. Derek, say hello to the folks of Columbus.
Good evening, Columbus. My name is Derek Diggs, and I'm the Chief of Police for the Fort Myers, Florida Police Department. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this community forum. I spent my entire career, more than 4 decades, as a public safety professional. There are serious challenges concerning how we police our communities today. Over the past year and a half, we've witnessed mass protests, riots, serious destruction of property, and harm to individuals in response to the national debate on use of force. Most major cities are experiencing serious spikes in violence and violent crime related to the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The city of Fort Myers experienced mass protests, but we did not have riots, vandalism, or serious destruction of property, nor do we have the record level spikes in violence and violent crime. Instead, we achieved a 5th straight year of violent crime and overall crime reduction. How we police a community matters. The lack of rioting and destruction is a direct result of how we police our community. Community engagement, networking, and relationship building are critical to establishing trust. An important part of this happens in schools, where lasting impressions are made and trust is solidified with our youth. Positive interactions set the stage for mutual respect, as does demonstrating accessible career pathways for students who want to explore a career in public safety and represent their communities. Our officers are trained matters. Emphasizing diversity and inclusion is important in order to reflect the community that we serve. Training opportunities increased over 400% during my tenure at the Fort Myers Police Department. I also established a system of performance metrics to ensure a fair and equitable process for career advancement. Under my leadership and guidance, policing and public safety has been re-engineered in 2 different metropolitan cities, enhancing relationships between the police department and the communities they serve, while drastically reducing violent crime. With support of your community members, your city leadership, your elected officials, and stakeholders, I am confident these successful results can be replicated in the city of Columbus. Thank you for allowing me to join you this evening.
Thank you, Derek. Next, Mr. Avery Moore.
Again, good evening, family. I'm honored to have this opportunity to sit before you, come to you virtually instead of in person. I really appreciate it. I come with over 30 years of experience from a very progressive city here in Dallas. I have considered myself to be a well-rounded leader in that I've experienced every aspect of policing, from patrol all the way up. I have really been developed for this time and for this moment. So don't want to just go over my resume. I want to leave you with a thought. So I want you to think of me as a race car. Under my hood is a large engine of 21st century policing, all 6 pillars. Steering wheel, procedural justice. Gas tank is filled with knowledge, wisdom, understanding, community relations, morale building. Then we go to the start line where I'm waiting for the mayor to fire the fire pistol so we can navigate these laps of trust, navigate these laps of community policing, navigate how we can build a strong relationship and partnership that we can come together collectively and make the city of Columbus the safest city in America. I think big because I believe in us, which is the last 2 letters of Columbus. We together can accomplish it. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Avery. And finally, we'll hear from Yvonne Roman.
Very nice to meet you all. You've all seen our resume. My resume is available on LinkedIn. So I'm going to tell you the story of me, right? Each of us were shaped by our surroundings, by our experiences, by our family values, by the communities that shape our perspective on what a society is. I'm Puerto Rican. I was born on the island. And my dad lived through the Newark Rebellion as rioting spread across so many American cities in the 60s and 70s, fueled by the inequalities and injustices that we call systemic racism that created 2 Americas, one white and one for others. In fact, I was 2 years old when my family was caught up in the Puerto Rican revolt during a Labor Day festival in 1974. The police decided to break up an unruly crowd, which really was nothing more than friends and family enjoying a festival day during a warm summer. The police marched their mounted horses across the park's lawn, stepping on a child laying on a blanket, and the crowd erupted. My dad grabbed me, and my family literally ran for their lives as the police opened fire. I'd like to tell you that the experience that I had as a young teenager was different than my dad's, but it wasn't, because I grew up in an era where people that looked like me, Black and brown teenagers, were considered super predators. So we were constantly being surveilled, constantly being stopped. And I wish I could tell you that my experience was different as a young police officer, but it wasn't. Newark embraced broken windows and engaged in mass arrests of Black and brown communities. And Newark, like the NYPD, are both operating under consent decrees now that the DOJ found patterns of unconstitutional policing. I survived a police department that wasn't designed for me to thrive, but I'm intelligent, I'm resilient, persistent, and I rose through those ranks. I negotiated the consent decree with the Department of Justice, and just 5 years later, Newark is a much better police department than the one I arrived in 1995. So that's what I bring to Columbus. An understanding of how systemic racism works, of how police practices and the city's history works to deteriorate trust in policing. But I also know that transformation is possible and that a police department can arise from the ashes of despair and damaged relationships to renewed public trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. Let's jump into the conversation, Columbus. I want to stay there for a second. Some of you have shared parts of your resume. Others have decided to let us get to know you at a different level. But I am interested from all of you, talk about your experience and what has really prepared you to lead the Columbus Division of Police at this moment, right? We are in some unprecedented times. Our community is challenged in a number of ways, and you will be inheriting a lot of those challenges that we'll talk about tonight. What's prepared you in your background to be the leader of this of this group of officers and in this community? And anybody can start.
Okay.
Okay, I'll go first.
Elaine, I'll let you start. Avery, you cut behind me.
Okay, I'll go first. So the one thing that I will say is that the city of Columbus is very similar to Detroit in some respects. And a lot of the things that we went through in the city of Detroit, Columbus is going through. We've had a civilian oversight board since the 70s. So that's something that I've had my entire career. I have a great relationship with our Board of Police Commissioners. We work with them all the time. We work with them in regards to our policy reviews. We work with them in regards to our oversee of our disciplinary process. So we have a great relationship with them, and they also stand with us in the community. They are huge supporters of the police because we've had an opportunity to develop those relationships, and they know that we're all about the business of making sure that our police officers are held accountable. So that's extremely important, working with the Board of Police Commissioners and civilian oversight boards. We also have been through a consent decree. As a matter of fact, the majority of my career was spent in a consent decree. So I understand what it means to address policy, compliance, and auditing. That's what I do. That's part of my policing and how I'm bred. I also was an integral part of being able to get out of our consent decree. We've met all of our objectives. So we did meet all our objectives. We came out of the consent decree, and we still managed to audit and make sure that we're still in compliance to this day. We also have officer-involved shootings. We've had 4 year to date. So me being in charge of the eastern side of the city, as well as the Metropolitan Division, I am intimately involved with our officer-involved shootings from a tactical standpoint. And I also had major crimes, and I also had internal affairs, which we did it from an administrative standpoint, as well as we investigated shootings that officers were involved in. So I've had the opportunity to delve into that. We do our 72-hour reviews to make sure that our tactics, we don't want to wait until the investigation is complete. We want to make sure that our tactics were sound. If there's anything that we can do to implement something immediately to stop this from occurring or to help our officers, we're going to do that. So our officer-involved shootings, our civil.
So let's stay. I want to come back to that, Elaine, because I want to make sure we're going to have a specific conversation around some of those issues. But let me let Avery get in here. It's a little bit about your background. I want to come back to some of the issues you just raised as a part of some of the experiences that you gave us. Avery, go ahead.
Yes, sir. So as an assistant chief in Dallas, it's the 9th largest city in the country, 9th largest police department, over 3,000 officers. As I said, I had the opportunity to work in every facet, very proud of that. But what's unique about me is when I was asked to consider applying for the job, I actually hopped on the plane and flew up to Columbus. I had the opportunity to meet with a lot of stakeholders, community members, who led me to more community members, who led me to more community members. So what I know from their testimony is there is an issue when it comes to trusting the police department. So I think we have to start there. So I sowed some seeds, and I promised them that as their chief, we would definitely have a relationship. It has to start with robust conversation that we're not afraid of as it relates to racism, systemic racism, poverty, whatever the issue is. The consensus from all my meetings was they want to be included. They want to feel a part of the policing process. We talk about community policing, which is good, but we forget the very first word, which is community. Communities are bright, intelligent, thoughtful residents that have great ideas how we can make the Columbus Police Department better. Not only that, I met with some officers, outstanding police department that is ready to change in the right way. All they want is leadership that's consistent. They don't mind being held accountable. They expect it as long as it's consistent. So again, I'm ready. I believe I've been groomed for this, developed for it, And all I need is the opportunity to come forward with the police department, with the community. We embrace each other and we say we are going to be the best that we can be. Thank you.
Thanks, Avery. Derek, Yvonne, we're talking about what's prepared you to kind of lead this department at this moment. Any additional comments you'd make around your preparation to be the Columbus Police Chief?
So I believe that all of us are extremely talented, or we wouldn't be among the 4 that were selected to be here, right? You can look at our resumes and see our accomplishments. But I think it takes a sense of humility and a sense of self to know that you don't have all the answers. There's so much knowledge in the world, right? And too often police officers work in silos, we're insular, and that hinders innovation and progress in police departments. So I pride myself in being a lifelong learner, and that's led me to embrace science, to really understand what evidence-based is, not just a buzzword, right? It takes courage to admit when something's not working, right? And that's what science allows you to do, to evaluate a program and see, is it truly doing what it's intended to do, or does it cause harms to communities and to relationships? So I'm part of a growing community of police executives with advanced college degrees that understand how the scientific methods work, so you can evaluate your programs and make sure that you're not creating harms to communities or to relationships. So I've tapped that network, and I've got the support of a ton of experts that want to come along with me to Columbus and to implement these strategies that the science shows works, that the science shows will not harm communities. So that's my interest in coming here. It's rooted in this unique opportunity that's been created, where we can build a team of talent to work alongside the talent that exists in Columbus. I think that Columbus is poised for an opportunity to not just correct the harms that have been caused in Columbus, but to be a national model that other agencies could replicate. The police department is well-resourced, and that's an additional asset. So any team that has this expertise can get to work quickly in identifying the talent inside, in partnering with our communities and identifying what specifically are the problems, not coming in and assuming that you know what the community wants, and to co-produce policing that will address all of their needs.
Very good. Derek, anything you would add?
You know, I'm a law enforcement professional with over 4 decades of experience in police work, with almost a decade of experience as a chief of police. I had the ultimate pleasure of being the first African-American to be selected chief of police in the history of the city of Toledo. And I ensured on my watch that the Toledo, Ohio Police Department was the most diverse in department history. I took command of the Toledo Police Department and the Fort Myers Police Department in some of the most challenging times in the city's history. In Toledo, we just went through the toughest economic times it ever been in history. Layoffs of police officers, budget deficits, low staffing, and high incidence of violence. In Florida, we had challenges involving violent crime, but we also had challenges involving police corruption, racism, and undermining by political figures of our police practices. But in both situations, under my leadership and guidance, I was able to successfully re-engineer policing and public safety in these 2 communities. With this experience and working in collaboration with your city leadership, with your political stakeholders, and community members, I am confident I can improve police community relations in the city of Columbus, as well as enhance the public safety.
Well, and I want to pick up right where you left off, Derek, which is this idea of police community relations. And my intro, and I think for those of you who are savvy and probably have been researching Columbus, we've got some challenges around the relationship between the police, law enforcement, and the broader community. Some credibility has been lost. And I want you to talk to me about, what do you do as chief to start to rebuild that credibility? What can we look to your leadership to really be able to restore the faith in law enforcement in this community? What would you do? How would you get it done?
I'll start off, if it's okay. It's all about trust. It's about trust, improving the trust between the police department and the citizens of Columbus. There would be 5 focus areas that I would focus on. First of all, we got to improve police training. We got to make sure our officers understand this thing called bias, implicit bias, explicit bias. We got to make sure officers understand how we properly use force and understand the thing that we call about de-escalation and sanctity of life. We also have to understand about professional development. You know, policing is an honorable profession, but we have to conduct ourselves in a professional manner. And that goes not just for our entry level officers on the beat, but as you assume command, we have to be professionals. Number two, we gotta involve ourselves with the youth. We gotta promote youth development. And both agencies that I am in command of, we have robust youth development and youth intervention programs, police athletic leagues, where our officers help work with coaches and these kids and provide the structure, the discipline, the inspiration, the self-esteem. And we use the athletics as the hooks to get to work with these kids and provide positive interaction with them, especially when at-risk youths. We have over 870 at-risk youths in our police athletic league in the city of Fort Myers currently. We have to engage our community in both planning and oversight. I have several police advisory boards. The latest one here we call as our Project Safe Neighborhood Advisory Board that assists me in finding different strategic ways to continue to reduce the violence. We have police clergy board, and we also have a fair and impartial policing board that makes sure that we have diversity and inclusion in our policing practices in the city of Fort Myers. Fourth, we've got to connect residences in our marginal community with resources. And that's why we have a robust restorative justice initiative, where we work with our community partners and deal with citizens that may have problems with opioid abuse, may have problems with trauma, mental health, homelessness. I'm not sure about Columbus, but in Florida, we have a big homeless problem. And so we work with our community partners to make sure that we connect our residences with the resources. I'm proud to say it took me almost 4 years, but now I have my own building where I can work with community partners to provide and connect these resources to our community members. And finally, it's about building relationships between the police officers and the citizens. And that starts at the top with the chief of police, all the way down to those officers on the beat. You make time to engage. We deploy our officers. If, for example, in Ohio, we had a robust officer foot patrol program. We had officers on bikes. We had community policing officers that rode motorcycles. We had district stations. In Florida here, we just opened up 6 neighborhood stations, all to try to make sure that we have an opportunity for our community members to get to know our officers. Because when you start talking about trust, you have to talk about relationships. And we have to have those type of relationships in order for us to have trust.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And so any others in terms of what do we need to do to really reestablish this credibility that's been lost through this process?
So I'll go next if you don't mind, Mo. I agree with what the chief said, but I'll add to it. First of all, we can't just go in assuming that we have trust. Because again, their mouth to my ear, that's a big issue. We don't have any trust. So we have to start there, establishing trust. And you do that by being consistent. Say what you mean what you say. And as you engage in dialogue, your dialogue has to be more than just checking a box. It has to be, we sit down, we talk, we take some actionables away from it. We execute those actionables, we come back, we do a follow-up report. And what we're doing is establishing trust. We're showing that we're credible. We're showing that they can relate to us, the residents. Again, the residents want to be included. They want to be included in every process of policing, as they have the right to. Community policing is much, much bigger than I think what we've done in law enforcement. It really is relying on the community to help us police them in a way that is acceptable to everybody. It can be lawful, it can be acceptable, but it may not be the right thing to do at the right time, as far as what the community is talking about. But what I believe that I've done is when you engage the community and you say, hey, this is the issue, violent crime, for example, how do you want us to help you and how can you help us? That type of dialogue that's open and honest is profound, and the impact can be amazing. So I think, again, that's where you start. You really have to hone in and believe the community. You got to believe that they want to be policed, but not everybody deserves to be policed. Stats are this: 90% of all people in any large city obeys the law. So you don't have to police them. That's where you get complaints of being over policing, stereotyping, focusing on an ethnicity group. But if you really focus on that 5% that's doing the violent crime or doing the crime, then the community will join in that, and you will find that they will give you information when you need it. They will help you solve crimes. And these are things that I've done here in Dallas, so I know they work. So I'm all about community policing. I'm all about communication because that shows you're transparent. And I like to give communities a call of action. This is what I need from you. I need you to help me. When you come to Columbus, that's not a one-man job. And I think all of us would agree, this has got to take a team effort, a family effort. If we're really serious about crime, if we're really serious about inclusion, if we're really serious about attacking racism, we can only do that together. And that's what I think you do in this case. And that's what I would bring in there. I get excited when I talk about it because I'm pumped. I love policing. I love people, and I am a service provider. So thank you.
Yeah. Yvonne, I saw you trying to get in there. Go ahead. How do we reestablish this trust that has been broken or bruised with the Columbus community and police? I think you're muted.
Okay, so I agree. It's the most important aspect that we need to concentrate on, and too many programs and actions from the police department work to chip away at that trust. We talk about community policing, right? But then it's like, yeah, we have community policing. It's that team over there. No, community policing, community engagement has to be a management philosophy in everything you do, baked into all your policies, your strategies, and your programs. And the police has to ensure that what they do is legitimate and that they're being procedurally just in what they're doing. You have organizations that will say, well, we're doing community policing and we're going to give away some ice creams and we're going to bring photographers so they can see what we're doing, right? Is that really genuine? And then if you send these officers out into these neighborhoods and you say build relationships, but by the end, I want you to have 2 tickets and 2 arrests because we're measuring productivity. Are you really valuing those relationships, right? So you have to engage in these relationships with your communities, but your communities are diverse and you can't have one blanket policy, one size fits all, because each community's needs will be different. And I think that's what I've learned through my experience in Newark in dealing with very diverse communities. Growing up in my neighborhood, it was predominantly Latino. By the time that I retired, it's a mix of Jamaican, Haitian, Black, Latinos from a dozen countries, Brazilian and Portuguese. You can't assume that each community wants the same type of policing. So you have to meet them at the level that they want the police to engage them in. Your LGBTQ community, when I met my community, their needs were specific to the transgender community and to their youth. So we created a curriculum in partnership with Rutgers University to meet their needs. But I also saw that our police departments, though we say we value diversity, weren't as diverse as the communities that we represent. I started an initiative to increase the representation of women in policing because the ones that I saw were most being dismissed from academies were women of color, right? So if we were eliminating them, we were losing people that we know the research says will improve outcomes for policing. And now at my time with the Center for Policing Equity, we're using that data. Well, that's what police departments do. We have metrics, we have data, and we're data rich. We can analyze our own data and see what actions we're engaging in that produce disparities that harm our relationships. We just have to make better use of the information that we have and in evaluating it.
Yeah, I love to focus on using data to tell the story and pivoting based on the use of that data. I love that. Elaine, this is your world, right? I mean, we talk about police community relations. You've done a lot of work in this area. What would we expect from a Chief Elaine Bryant, and what would you expect of your officers relative to community relations and reestablishing this trust with community?
So first and foremost, everything that they said is spot on. Community relations is huge. It's not just about an opportunity to take a picture. It's not about a one moment situation. You have to build your trust and your relationship with the community, and it does not happen overnight. You have to be transparent. You have to go in and let them know that you want them to be a part of that change. There are so many community programs that we have in the city of Detroit, and a lot of them I've implemented that I think would be absolutely phenomenal for the city of Columbus. First thing is you have to humanize that badge. A lot of people look at police officers and they see the uniform and they say, oh, they're a cop, but they're mothers, their fathers, their uncles, their brothers. So one of the first things you want to do is take them out of their element, put them in a neutral spot, do some restorative justice programs, allow the community and the police officers to have those conversations so that they can say, hey, this is what I felt when this occurred. Or they can say that the police officers can say, this is what I meant, or this is what I was feeling when this happened, because a lot of times they just make assumptions about them. I will never forget, we had a program called Serve Then Protect in the city of Detroit. We actually take our police academy students and we allow them to go into the community before they graduate so that they get a chance to serve the homeless. They get a chance to actually go to a shelter and talk to people. They get an opportunity to go to a halfway house and communicate, like I said, in real time. One of my police officers shared something I will never forget. We were in this circle, we're talking to people that were coming out of coming out of a substance abuse situation. And he shared that he had been homeless and living in his car for 2 years. None of us knew that. That was amazing. That was an amazing moment for the community to connect with them and see it's not just you. Another officer shared that his mother was a substance abuse user. So getting the community and the officers to actually relate to each other is extremely important. We have programs where we don't just look at, you can't arrest your way out of a situation. You absolutely have to look at the holistic approach. You have to look at whether or not this community has an illiteracy problem. Do they have an economic problem? Is it a youth issue? Are the youth causing a lot of the crimes? We have our youth programs. We have children in trauma intervention camp. We have our brotherhood and sisterhood. You can't start in high school when dealing with children, because by high school, they've already developed a lot of the groups / gangs that they're going to be involved with. So you start in the middle school. You address the middle school children and you get an opportunity to divert and be able to get them before other people get their hands on them. So it's bigger than that. We have a community closet where we took one of our cell blocks, because we are no longer in the business of housing prisoners, and we turned it into a store where people in need can come get baby clothes, food, whatever they may need. You know, we have Cop on a Block. We take our roll calls to actual neighborhoods. It is so much more than just talking about, like you said, having a meeting. Okay, the meeting is great, but what are you going to do after the meeting? What is the real connection with the community? Are you involving them? Are they standing by you with press conferences? Are you letting them have an input on your policies? And when it comes to the LGBT community, we are extremely, extremely very diverse in that. We had our first transgender officer join our department in 2017, and we've since had a couple more. I think it's extremely important for training, diversity, inclusion, to let people know you have to understand the community, and you have to have your police department be diverse as well, because that's a problem. They need to reflect the community in which they police. So that's going to be a recruitment issue.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you went to recruitment, because that's where I was headed to, how we go about getting the very best officers. You know, we'd like to think that everyone who puts himself up for service as a police officer fully embraces all of the things that would take to be successful in that role. We've seen that may or may not be the case in some communities. What do we know? The stats show us that disproportionately African Americans and communities of color have disproportionate contact with police across the nation and in a number of urban communities like Columbus. I guess the first question I'll ask you all to respond to, and I'll throw this to Derek, to you first. How would you plan to both assess and then weed out officers who either may be racially profiling, have underlying biases, or just straight out racist behaviors? How do you root that out of a department that is big and historic in a lot of the practices they have? Where do you start?
Well, Chair, I would start doing a cultural diagnosis of the entire police department. We got to find out what's affecting our recruitment, what's affecting our hiring, what's affecting our selection process, what's affecting our our promotional process. Then we have to look at addressing those needs so that we diversify those ranks and use best practices, making sure that we select candidates that will have the knowledge, skills, and the character to become police officers for the 21st century. If we have one of the things that I'm a strong supporter of diversity in policing. And one of the things that bothers me is this fact that, we can't get enough people of color to join our ranks. The city of Columbus is home with 900,000 people. I mean, we can't diversify the police department. There are practices and there are progressive recruiting strategies that we have to employ to diversify our police department. But one of the things I'm very proud of is I go into the schools and we have a program called the 2P2 program, and that's the Pathway to Policing program. And what we do, we go into our high schools and we look at selected individuals who have a desire and interest in the criminal justice field. They take criminal justice classes. And what we do, we develop an individualized program to put them on a pathway to become police officers here in the city of Fort Myers. Now, we can't get them in the police academy till they're 21. So we have to be very creative in what we do with these kids. So usually when they turn 18, we get them on the police department and I will employ them in various manners: police cadet, police explorer, community service aides. At the same time, we're grooming them and sowing the seeds for them to have a successful police career. We pay them these assignments, we pay for their college education, we give them initial police type training, we put a mentor with them to love them, to hug them, to work with them and make sure they stay on course till they took 21 years of age. And unlike the city of Columbus in Southwest Florida, we got successful students have to pay for their own police academy training. We have regionalized training academies. So what I do, I pay for their training. I pay for the police training academy and I sponsor them. And we get them in the police academy, we get them trained, and we send them right back out to the community to let other individuals know that, hey, listen, this person is able to do it and become police officers in our community. I can do it also.
Yeah.
How does that help? It helps us diversify our police ranks with people from the community who were born and raised in the community. And once again, that helps us with trust and it helps us to diversify in our police ranks.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Derek. And that's been identified as one of the strategies the community is suggesting here in Columbus as well, to see more officers of the neighborhoods get into policing as a profession. Yvonne, I'm going to come to you because I know you're doing some work that is also about getting underrepresented populations, in your case, women, represented more in the police force. But talk about what strategies you see to diversify more women, more minorities, more communities of color represented in the force so that the force can look like the communities they're serving. What else is working and what else does the Columbus need to be thinking about to do that?
So Chief Diggs hit on the police culture, right? You have to address the culture. You can't just say, well, it is what it is. No, because the chief sets the tone for what is acceptable and what is not based on what he or she decides to discipline. Racism is not minor discipline. Racism should be major discipline. It should be a reason to eliminate candidates. It should be a reason to fire individuals who act on that racism. And at the Center for Policing Equity, we know that we can't control people's thoughts, but we certainly can track their actions. We can measure their actions. We can measure disparities, right? In those actions that police officers take. I got involved with the women in policing because I saw that women were failing police academies at rates from 60 to 80%, which was unheard of in the past in New Jersey. I knew something was wrong. And I know that violated the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So as I went digging, I went getting more and more resistance, right? And I kept hearing this thing that, oh, we're going to weaken policing, we're watering down our standards. Why is it that when we say that we want to recruit a more diverse pool, not saying that we're going to water down the standards, not saying that we're going to change the standards to get in, that the reflex is that we're going to choose from a poor set of candidates, that we're weakening the application pool. That in itself speaks to the idea of supremacy, right? That you think if you're bringing in more women, that if you're bringing in more people of color, that somehow that means that you're going to cheapen what it means to be a police officer. They don't see the inherent bias in just saying that. So with the National Institute of Justice, I partnered with them. We created a summit on women in policing. We brought in 100 experts and we fleshed out what the obstacles and barriers were. And then from there, we created a report called Blazing a Path, Breaking Barriers and Blazing a Path. And that created the framework for the 30 by 30 project. And I'm happy to say that though I got a lot of pushback in the beginning in New Jersey, this is now a national effort. And we have 80 agencies that have partnered with us and have pledged to increase the number of women in policing, which will result in people of color coming in by 30% by 2030. So this addresses the issue of intersectionality. So then you have to ask yourself, an agency as big as Columbus, right? How is it possible that there's barely a person of color in the ranks, in the upper echelons, right? Is it that there's no one qualified to be there? Or is it that there's obstacles and barriers that unfairly target specific candidates? And you can't tell me that it's that they don't measure up, right? Because I'm here and the rest of the candidates here are showing that we have what it takes to reach these leadership positions, right? The issue is internally if they're not filtering up to the top.
Yeah. Elaine, I want to go back to the original question I posed to Derek, which is around this idea of how do you assess and weed out officers that may be showing bad behavior, racially profiling, showing some level of bias, or even outright racist behavior. What would you do as chief to start to get at some of that and root it out of your department?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, you have to look at supervision and management. So let's be clear, supervision and management, when you see behaviors like this, there are triggers. There are warning signs that let you know that these things are occurring. And a lot of times they're being ignored. When I was in charge of our professional standards, I came in at just the right time, and we had some racial issues and some discrimination issues going on. And one of the first things we do not tolerate it. We go straight to not only an investigative standpoint, but was it so egregious that you should be suspended? We had to go to our board of police commissioners and even ask for some people to be suspended without pay, because we didn't feel that even during an investigation, because of such egregious complaints, that they should be even out policing while we're investigating this. So I think that supervision is going to play a key role in this. If they're not responsive and they're not watching their officers and making sure that they're not doing the things that they shouldn't be doing, that they're harassing or discriminating, if they're out there not checking supervision, not checking the body cameras, not making sure their officers are policing in a very fair and unbiased manner, that's where you're going to have a problem. So direct supervision, management, and taking immediate action in regards to any complaint that you have. Training, you have to have training, and training in inclusion and diversity. You have to have training in implicit bias. You have to make sure that these officers understand when they come on the job that is not going to be acceptable. That behavior will get you immediately fired. So you have to take that standpoint, and you involve the community too. The community should come in and speak to these officers before they even graduate and talk about their expectations and what they want their officers in the city of Columbus to be, what they want them to represent. And going into these communities, these diverse communities, I know we're not talking about this, but the key to recruiting, you have to go in the communities and you have to recruit. You have 15 colleges in the city of Columbus. There's absolutely no reason why we should not be targeting these colleges and reaching out to these young men and women and trying to get them to join the police department. In our department, we have 14 female executives. That's unheard of across the nation. 14 female executives at the rank of captain and above. So, and we have close to 30% of women in our department. Why? Because we mentor, we bring them up. We go out as women and we go to these schools, we go to these colleges, and we attach ourselves to the women and we mentor them and we tell them, you can do this. And we show them you can do it by doing it ourselves. So that's very important.
Yeah, one of the things, Avery, that Elaine talked about was this piece of accountability, right? And one of the conversations I will tell you happening in Columbus is about the power of the fraternal order of police, right? And what that does for the ability to hold officers accountable in situations where at least it appears that officers have made mistakes or downright done something inappropriate. How do you balance that, right? A unionized police force that needs the protections that are afforded to it, and at the same time, not have unchecked power for the officers to do whatever they want to residents of the community and it never be held accountable. What's that balance in act, and how do you start to massage that for Columbus in a community that's already reeling from some of these challenges? I think you're muted, Avery. The wonders of technology, I know. It's
I'm
okay.
sorry. What I was saying is that is a dichotomy of leadership. You use the word balance, which is a very important word. We don't have a union here in Dallas, we have associations. So what I found that's effective is if you invite them to the table as well. The unions have a distinct responsibility to officers. And I like to equate it to their defense attorney. So they're going to do everything they can within their power to minimize or have no discipline at all, which is what they're supposed to do because the membership pays them. So what I found that's effective is if you invite them to the table, you show them whatever the allegations are, tell them or show them how you make your decision. And even if they don't agree, you're giving them a level of understanding. And I found that that's very effective. Another point I'd like to make is Elaine talked about accountability. I have an equation that I go by, and it's oversight times accountability plus efficiency equals effectiveness. So when you think about officers that are doing the wrong thing, if it's so egregious, obviously we all agree that they should be terminated. If it's something that's minor and you can correct that behavior through training, that's the way you go. Implicit bias, cultural diversity, making sure they understand cultural competencies. And I think those would be effective methods that you can actually redirect an officer. You know, I had the opportunity to speak one time with the Harvard Book Club, and they asked me that very same question. And I said, what we have done is we've hired people based on whatever the criteria is. Then we send them into a culture or community that they're completely uncomfortable in. So there's no wonder that these issues are popping up. So we have to do a better job of making sure we're equipping our officers with the proper tools so that they can go in the community and be effective and behave in such a way that nothing is compromised. This is an honorable profession. I believe that if we do, like Derek said, go to the schools, we do that here in Dallas, we can recruit better. We go on purpose and intentional to, if we need more Latinos, if we need more Blacks, whatever it is, we're very intentional about how we recruit. That's what you have to be. You can't be afraid to have conversations as it relates to ethnicity, as it relates to religion, whatever that is. But that certainly cannot be a criterion to disqualify someone. And you just have to make sure, again, it's our responsibility as the chief to make sure our officers are equipped with the right tools so they can be effective regardless of the community.
Yeah, you know, we talked a lot about the force and the community, but I want to give you all each an opportunity, just a minute though, to speak directly to the officers that you would be in command of. And I want you to talk about what you would expect of them and what they can expect from you. I'll give each of you just a quick minute, so be as succinct as possible and watch the chat for that. Yvonne, we will start with you.
So I want to provide an opportunity for them to also experience legitimacy and procedural justice. We talk about that externally, right? And how we engage with our communities, but we don't talk about how a toxic environment internally affects those police officers and how they in turn go out on the streets and patrol, right? We have to ensure that there's fairness and discipline, that there's fairness and opportunities, that there's fairness in who we're developing for leadership opportunities. So the officers should be in a learning environment, that they get to learn, that they get to be developed, that they get to be groomed. So I ask for them for an honest workday, and they in turn will have the support of their chief and their communities, but they have to do what's in the best interest of our communities, because ultimately we are public servants and our job is to serve the communities that we've been tasked to.
Thank you, Dave. We'll pick up with you. Talk to your officers. What can they expect from you? What are you expecting of them if you are the chief?
Is that for me?
That is correct.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm
There.
difficult with technology. Very first thing is as chief police is that I will let them know what my expectations are. And my expectations are very, very simple. And that is to do their job. To do their job. That doesn't mean to do their job the way they think they should do it. That means to do their job the way they're supposed to do it. Be professional, be courteous, be respectful in each and every encounter they have with citizens of the public. And when possible, try to show some empathy. And the reason you need to try to show some empathy is because of the fact that in most situations, citizens, officers, interactions, and contact is the most traumatic experience for these citizens out here. It's very rare for citizens to interact with a police officer, and it's very traumatizing, and it's very difficult for them. So show some empathy. But the thing I also will let them know that I will give them the training and to meet my expectations, and I will give them all the education that they need to do their job, the equipment, policies, procedures, everything else. But I will hold them accountable. As long as they're doing their job, they're fine by me. And I will give them the leadership that they need for them to do their job. But I will hold them accountable if they're not doing their job. And if they're doing things that is a training issue, we will retrain them. But if it's a misconduct issue, they will be held accountable.
Thank you, Chief. Elaine, let's come to you. What's your message to your officers? What they can expect from you? What do you expect from them?
So I'm going to talk to them. So team, I know what it's like to go through change. I've had 9 chiefs in my 21-year career. So I know that you're looking for some stability. You're looking for somebody that's going to come in and that's going to listen to your concerns and your issues and be able to make this police department the best that it can be with you. That's what I want to do for you. If I get this job, I absolutely am going to stand by you, and I'm going to support you when you're right and when you're doing the right things. But I'm also going to hold you to a high standard of excellence, because that's what the citizens of Columbus deserve. They deserve excellence from their police department, and they deserve a police department that's going to be unbiased and inclusive of the entire community. So I'm going to stand with you, and I'm going to make sure that you get the things that you need to be able to do your job. And I want you to have balance, because when you have balance in your life, you're more productive. So that's what I want to say to you.
Thanks, Elaine. Avery, talk to your team. What do you expect of them? What can they expect of you?
Family, have nothing but respect for you. I'm going to show you the respect you deserve. I'm going to show you the dignity that you deserve. I'm going to listen to you, which is going to show you how valuable you are to me. You're an outstanding police department. So get ready to have some fun. Let's loosen up our collars a little bit. Have some fun. The community is not our enemy. It really is an us. So we need to embrace that. I've embraced the city of Columbus. I've embraced you. And I just ask that you embrace me and we embrace each other. Let's go out and have some fun. Policing doesn't have to be hard. It's not about enforcement. It's about engagement. And that's great. Let's go out and say hi, smile at people, have a good time. And when it's time to put the bad guys in jail, we will. So let's get ready, guys. I'm ready.
Avery, I want to stay with you for a minute on this next question, which is around, if you were successful in this pursuit, you would be inheriting a job where perhaps there is waning or lower levels of morale within the department. And then you've got a skeptical community out there who really wants reform and want it now. What do you say to both support your officers and at the same time, again, speak to the community and what the department needs to do in order to rebuild their trust? What specifically would you be focused on as chief?
So number one, when it comes to building morale, you start off by listening to your officers, giving them a voice in the process, allowing them to be involved and included in decision making. So then when it comes to reform, they're not resistant because they feel like they've been involved in the entire reform process. Officers aren't against change. I hear that all the time. The reality is, I've been doing this for 30 years. The way I started doing this job is not the way I do it today because I've had to change. You have to grow. You get more experience, you get more education, you get all the tools that you need to grow. What officers have a problem with is how the message is put out there. So you got to put the message out right. Say, hey guys, this is why we need to change. We need to make sure that our core values are in line with the community core values. And we can only do that by asking each other, sitting down, listening, learning, and then we can lead each other. So that's what I would say to them. What was the second part of your question, Mo? It had to do with reform. Can you tell me that again?
No, I think you hit it. I think you hit it. So, but I do want to stay on this concept of reform, and I'll get some perspectives from all of you around this. One of the groups you would be working with as chief is a group called the Chief Advisory Panel, and they are a group of citizens who have come together really to serve as a kitchen cabinet for all of you to vet issues, to talk through, to get the community perspective, in addition to obviously the department perspective. And so they've submitted a couple questions, and I'm going to pose one to you now. And the first one deals with, none of you came up in Columbus, so you would be virtually an outsider to that team of officers and staff. Recognizing that you might experience some resistance to change, how are you going to make transformational change internally and externally, even given the fact that you are not one of the boys, one of the girls here in Columbus yet? How do you do that? How do you still make transformation happen in Columbus? Anybody can start.
So I believe that first you have to acknowledge that you are an outsider, that you don't have all the answers, that you don't know the specific histories of each community within Columbus. And that's why when you first arrive, your most important task is to listen, right? To listen to the community stakeholders, to find out the history of how we've gotten to where we are in Columbus, to listen to the officers, to get the historical perspective, to understand truly what the issues are before you design a plan to make any kind of changes. I think it would be insincere to come in and say that you have the answers when you have yet to speak to anyone. So I think that the number one thing is to listen and to communicate effectively what your plans are once you've listened, and how each member of the community had an input into what you're deciding to do to impact change internally and externally for the residents of Columbus.
Talking about the outsider, but you come into a department that needs transformation internally and externally. How do you get it done? Dick, let's pick up with you, and then Elaine, I'll let you come behind him.
First of all, that's what you have a advisory board, advisory committee. That's their purpose. You come in and you lean on them. You embrace what they have to tell you. You understand what the learning curve. Let them allow you to zero down in their community networks. You embrace that. You have focus groups in the community. Understand what the history is all about. Understand where there's this disconnect between the police department and the community. And you show leadership by embracing what they're telling you. And then you go to your troops and you make sure that the vision that they want for the community, for their city, for policing, is the vision that you must align the police department to doing. It's all about leadership. It's not that hard. But you go in the community, you got to embrace, you got to engage, you got to listen, and you got to give them a part of the planning and how you plan on reorganizing the police department and policing that community in the way they feel that community needs to be policed. And you have to make sure that your policies, procedures, guidelines, SOPs are in line with a vision where the community is comfortable with and have similar visions for their police department. That's all about leadership. It's not as hard as people think, but you got to go in, you got to listen to folks, you got to engage folks, and you got to give them an opportunity to help plan the type of policing they want in their community.
Elaine, go ahead, get in there. What do you do? The newcomer, but you got to make transformational change. Where do you get started? How do you get it done?
So it is twofold. You're dealing with the community and you're also dealing with your police officers, and you are an outsider. So you cannot come in thinking that you know all the issues, you know everything that's going on. You have to trust your community advisory board. And I will go a step further. I'd have a police officer advisory board as well as a advisory board as well, because their issues are going to be a little different as well. So I'm not going to just come in and start making changes based on what I think. I'm going to find out what the real issues are. And sometimes you have to find out that what you think is an issue, the police officers are like, no, 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 you don't understand. This is what it's really like. So you absolutely have to be inclusive of your community. That advisory board is going to be key. They're going to be able to not only help you and assist you in learning about your community, but they're going to be able to introduce you to other aspects of the city of Columbus. They're going to be able to bring in different perspectives. So you want to be inclusive of that advisory board, but you also want to include your officers and find out what it is they like. I know we've had outsider chiefs come in and, oh, sometimes it did not go well. It did not go well at all because they came in and they basically trashed the department and said that no one is good. We know that's not true. We know that's not true. There may be things that are broken, but there are things that are working very well. So what you don't want to do is make change for the sake of making it. You want to make change that is necessary and change that's going to be powerful and change that's going to be transforming.
So, Ava, I want to come to you. One of the challenges I would say in the Columbus community was how police dealt with some of the protests, some of the demonstrations that were happening last summer. And as a part of that process, many in the community feel that there was excessive force used. You've been in a position where in your role in Dallas, you've had to both manage and plan for those kind of demonstrations and protests. Talk a little bit about how would a Chief Wilson actually, Chief Moore, how would you approach this idea of how to plan for those demonstrations that are inevitable, how to make sure that the rights of citizens are respected, and at the same time, officers are able to do their job in the process? How do you approach those situations, and what would you offer to Columbus?
So number one, you're right, I have experience in protest. We had quite a few here in Dallas. We're still having them. So what I've learned, the mistakes that we made and we learned quickly from, is you have to make sure you give clear, concise direction to your officers. They need to know exactly what your expectations are. They need to know what we're going to tolerate and what we're not going to tolerate, specifically where the line is drawn. And you got to stick to that. You can't tell them one thing and then 5 minutes later you're telling them something else, and then you're telling them something else. Because when I read the report, the judge said it was like they ran amok. And that showed me that that was a leadership issue. They should have had clear instructions. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to handle it. We went so far here in Dallas, my team and I, we actually put it in the operation plan. And it was real elementary. I am Officer Avery Moore. You have violated blah, blah, blah. And we spelled it out. And we found that that really helped officers make the right decisions. Because if you're not giving them clear decisions, they won't know what to do. And they'll know it's against the law. But the real issue is, do we need to arrest for it right now? Is it safe for the officers? Is it safe for the community? So again, what's the governmental interest? So those are things I've learned. Also, it's very important that you have a dialogue with the organizer of the protest. Although sometimes they switch it up in the middle, at least they know who you are. You give them the rules of engagement as well. This is the leniency we're going to show you. For example, in Dallas, you can't be in the street. Well, if you have 1,000 protesters, they can't be on the sidewalk. So we say, hey, we're going to allow you to take the street. What's your route so we can make it as safe as we can for you? And that type of engagement we found here actually works better. So although we're still experiencing protests, we're not experiencing the violence. And I think it's due to we worked more hours than probably what we should have. But the point was to have a plan that officers understood, the community understood, the protesters understood, the business owners understood, and we were out front with that. The only thing that I would add that I think we should have done in retrospect is we should have used social media more to put those rules of engagement out there. So that's what I would do in Columbus. I support First Amendment. You have the right to protest. Our job is to make it as safe for everybody involved.
Thank you, Avery. Derek, I want to come to you in terms of something we read in your earlier bio, which was, I believe I read this right, that in Fort Myers, you were able to see a 51% reduction in violent crime during your tenure as chief. That's outstanding. Talk about how you did it and if you think similar results could be achieved in Columbus.
I am confident similar results can be achieved in Columbus. And the number one focus we have is a community violence reduction intervention initiative. And we restructure our entire policing efforts around this. We did the same thing when I was police chief in Toledo, Ohio. In Toledo, we call it the Community Initiative to Reduce Violence. In Fort Myers, we call it the Group Violence Intervention Initiative. And it's where we work with the community, faith-based group, outreach groups, social services, political leaders, and we provide a unified front in going after the small percentage of individuals that are responsible for driving the violence in the community. Statistics has indicated that across the country in major cities, there's a small number of individuals who are the drivers of violence. They usually are responsible for anywhere between 55 to 65% of the violence that occurs in your communities. The idea is to focus your efforts on these individuals, but we don't focus our efforts on these individuals to arrest them. We don't focus our efforts on these individuals to harass them. We focus our efforts on these individuals to save them. These are at-risk individuals who fell through the cracks of life because of problems in various communities. So we have to work with our social service people. We have to work with our faith-based groups. And we do direct messaging to two different avenues. One is a call-in, where we bring these individuals in and we tell them about the services and try to provide the services for them as a community, not just as a police department. We do things, what we do custom notification. We will seek these individuals out individually. And we let them know that number one, violence won't be tolerated in the community, but we try to provide a mechanism so they can work themselves out of the violent lifestyle. But it's a community effort. We try to do the things we need to do to save these individuals. However, if they want to go and involve themselves in the violent lifestyle, they want to be the trigger pulls, they want to commit violent crime, then the community, not just the police department, the community shows a unified front, letting them know that violence will not be tolerated in the community. Yeah. So it's this very strong focus approach. And not only do that with our violent offenders.
New Jersey tonight touting a big.
It's the way we do policing throughout our organization. This focus approach on focusing on the small group of individuals that are the criminal drivers in our community. And that's why we have the 51% reduction in violence. Okay. All right. We can buy that. That sounds like a good strategy. I want to move this conversation then to this topic around accountability. It's been one of the things the community is really demanding of our department. And so I guess just to put it bluntly, how would you all ensure more transparency and accountability by the police to the public concerning activities around conduct, around misconduct of officers, and then specifically, what would you as chief want to see reported to the public around that transparency and accountability? Anyone can pick up on it and start.
So there should be transparency on how the disciplinary system works, on what is major and minor discipline. You can also report the number of complaints that have been made on police officers and whether those complaints were sustained or not sustained. So those numbers would be in the aggregate. What people want to know is what's being done, if investigations are being accepted, if when someone makes a complaint, whether that's going to be investigated, and then what the outcomes are. And as long as you're transparent in your disciplinary process, the community will know what the expectations are, how to make a complaint, and police officers will also know what will result in discipline and what will not result in discipline. You have to have very clear policies that are available to everyone, your police officers, that the union has agreed to these policies, that they're in compliance when you discipline someone, so you don't lose it on appeal or through binding arbitration, but it should all be very clear.
So I'll take that a step further, and I would just say that obviously you have to have accountability, but your civilian oversight board that was recently created, they're going to provide a huge part of that accountability. They're going to help with policy implementation, making sure that the policies are correct, are fair and unbiased. And we're going to make sure that we work together, that Civilian Oversight Board, in regards to being transparent with the community and everything that's going on. So I think that's going to be a huge part of that accountability process, as well as in-house. Your supervisors have to do their job. It is so important that the supervisors and the managers do what they're supposed to do. Watch these officers. You don't wait for something to happen. You don't wait for a trigger. You look at, I know that they talked about a management awareness system or some sort of program that can trigger a response to let you know that officers are having X amount of incidents. That's important because you don't want to wait to get to a point of no return. If the officer is doing one or two things, you want to address that. Have that conversation with them. Find out if there's something that's going on that can be corrected through training. And if not, if it's something deeper, then you have to deal with that. But I think that's going to be twofold. It's going to be with the Civilian Accountability Board, as well as management and supervision, reviewing those body-worn cameras. You don't wait until it's going to happen. You should be doing that on a daily basis. Supervisors should be looking for different factors to say, okay, this officer may have an issue. We have to watch him. We have to figure out what's going on with him. So you want to be proactive in looking for incidents. You don't want to wait and be reactive and wait for it.
Right. Hey, everyone, I want to pick up on something that Elaine said, which is this idea of an early, it was suggested in the Matrix report and by the Safety Commission. They came up with a number of recommendations several years ago, and one of them recommended a viable early warning system to identify issues of bias or problems or dangerous behaviors among the officer ranks. How do you feel about those early warning systems? Would you support that? And do you see that as an effective strategy in helping to root out some of the behaviors we want to eliminate? You're muted again.
I said, yes,
Listen, I will tell you, if you become chief, we'll get you a tech person. We'll take care of that part.
Hey, I don't want to say my age, but anyway, yes, absolutely. We're in the process now of getting an early warning system. And the reason is it really supports the officer. I think it's the wrong conversation to say that we're going to do something to the officer or even for. This is really with the officer. We want to catch stuff before it gets to the point to where they have to be disciplined. Because again, someone mentioned this earlier, they could actually be crying out for help. So the early warning system is a way that we can identify behavior before it gets to the point that they need to be disciplined for it. Something that Elaine talked about was the oversight committee. We have one here. That is a great tool for the community. One is because they're separated from the police department, so there's credibility that's going to be given to them. And two, it's a great partnership to have. When it comes to accountability, that can't be something that's hidden. That has to be kind of upfront in your face. And as a chief, that's our responsibility. The community doesn't trust us because they don't think we hold officers accountable. So if we're not actually showing them, this is what the issue was, this is how it was resolved, and another follow-up, we checked on the officer a month later, a week later, that whole process, then we're doing the whole thing a disservice. And what we're finding is we're checking boxes. And I'm not a box checker. I'm about business and impact. I love police officers, and we owe it to them to give them tools that can help them. So I'm all for early warning systems, to answer your question again, specifically.
And that recommendation has come back to light in thinking about some of the instances in Columbus where officers have perhaps had a pattern, right? And the idea is that the community is asking that if we could identify the pattern earlier. But regardless of how we got there, right, what we know is that individuals who look like me, communities of color, African-American men in particular, have had disproportionate contact with this police department for a number of reasons. I want you, similarly to how I asked you to speak to your officers, I want you to speak to those communities of color that you would also inherit here in the Columbus area. They will be either the champions of your work or the victims of your non-work as chief. What do you say to those communities of color? How do you reassure them that your leadership will make their relationship with police better than perhaps it's been in the past? I want to hear from all of you quickly, but anyone can start.
So number one, I would say you have to own it. You can't argue about facts. Communities of color feel disenfranchised with policing. They feel disconnected. They feel like they're being targeted. One thing I've learned through my career is you can't tell people how to feel. That's the way they feel. So we have to address it. I think the most effective way is to not just say, you have a seat at my table. I'm going to bring my table to them. I want us to be able to sit down, have real conversation about the issues in this area of Columbus as it relates to the African-American community. Like you, I'm a Black man. I've raised 3 sons, so I know what that's like. Don't tell anybody, but I was just stopped 2 weeks ago for absolutely no reason. So I know what it's like. It's very real to me. It's not something that I will ignore. I think you have to listen again before you can effectively lead. Someone talked about, I think it was Derek talked about leadership. Leadership is 3-dimensional to me. As the chief, you have to be out front, but you also have to be in the middle. And the reason you have to be in the middle is because you have to be willing to bridge the gaps that are there as it relates to whatever the community is. African Americans don't want to be treated special. They want to be treated fairly with equality that's guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States. And that's the message that I would put out to them. That's the message that I would put out to my officers. And then I'd stand in the rear and push all of us towards equality and fairness.
All right. Thank you for that, Avery. Yvonne, what would you say to these communities that are hurting and want to see reforms here in Columbus? What can they expect from you?
I think there is accountability and not excuses for behavior that is unconstitutional. Your race doesn't make you a suspect. So a lot of times I'll hear segments of the law enforcement community and say, well, you know, if 93% of the people that are listed in reports are African American, then who do you expect us to stop? No, the reports don't say that the African American community is suspect. The report gives you a specific description of a specific person with an address, height, weight. It gives you suspicion for that one person. It doesn't give you suspicion for an entire community. So we need to educate our communities and our officers to make sure that they understand what constitutional policing is, and when they have the necessary constitutional requirements necessary to conduct that stop, right? That they fully understand what reasonable suspicion is, what probable cause is, right? I think too many officers may not fully understand the nuances, right, of the Constitution, and the communities may not understand when it's okay to call the police, right? We have this experience that we've seen repeatedly over the past few years of members of the community calling the police on members of our community that are Black or brown merely for existing in public spaces. And that means that we have to also educate our call takers to ask for more information. What specifically about this individual's actions is suspicious, right? Not just their race. It's a matter of training everyone on constitutional policing and what justifies a stop and what doesn't justify a stop.
Thanks, Yvonne. Derek, I'll pick up with you. What do you say to these communities of color who want to see new leadership from a new chief?
Number one, it's about leadership, and it's about setting the expectation for the people that work underneath you. But you can't hold officers accountable unless you give them the training and education that they need in this area and in policing altogether. After you give them the expectation, after you give them the training, then you have to have supervision and you hold them accountable through your supervisors. That's very important. And when officers fall below those expectations, then you take the appropriate action, the corrective actions on them. It could be discipline, it could be counseling, whatever. The other part of it is embrace civilian oversight. Embrace civilian oversight. Open up the books. Work with the oversight committee, whatever type of oversight committee you have. We have nothing to hide. If you're conducting your duties and conducting your job and running your police department the way it's supposed to be ran, there's nothing to hide. And if civilian oversight finds something that is not right, embrace it, work with them, because you're trying to improve policing in the community. I've been told that there's been a recommendation to bring the Department of Justice in. I would embrace that. That's a good thing. And if for some reason the Department of Justice don't want to come in, there are other companies and other type of corporations that can come in and do a needs analysis, do an audit of the police department. Embrace oversight, embrace civilian oversight. And
Okay.
that's how you come up with accountability and make your department the professional department that it needs to be.
Elaine, let me let you have the last word on that question. What do you say to these communities?
Let's be clear. The city of Columbus is less than 30% Black, but the use of force is well over half. That's an issue. So we have to find out what's going on and why that is. I understand, and I'm very concerned as you. So I want to find out, is it an issue of biased policing? Is it an issue of, implicit bias? I don't know, but I will make this promise to you. We're going to find out, and we're going to absolutely make sure that we recruit, and we want our communities to be reflective of, and we want our police department to be reflective of the community that we police. So we're going to try to recruit to try to change some of those numbers, even in our police department, because how is it that the city of Columbus has almost 30% Black, but their police department is less than 10%? So that's an issue in of itself. And I understand, and I'm going to address those concerns.
One of the other groups you talked about, or that you didn't talk about, but that came up earlier was our LGBTQ community and friends. And what we know is similar to minority communities of color, they often have disproportionate contact with law enforcement, and sometimes those situations don't end well. How do you focus on those issues? How do you educate officers to be more receptive and more supportive of those communities? And what needs to happen to ensure that they experience Columbus policing like any other resident should?
So we have an LGBTQ council. I think is extremely important. Again, if you have a strong and a large community, LGBTQ community, it has to be reflective of the police department. Again, we have transgender officers that have joined our department, but more importantly, we have a liaison that actually works for our special victims unit. And we're looking to put one in each precinct, because what that does is that allows the victim to be able to talk to somebody or relate to somebody, and they're willing to come forward and give that information, because a lot of times they don't trust the police. So they don't want to come forward. They don't want to give you information about crimes. So we've been able to implement that program where we actually put liaisons in the special victims unit, and we've actually seen an increase in our closure rate in regards to these victims in these crimes. Also, we do forums, training. We have one of our LGBTQ liaison. She trains across the whole state of Michigan, and it actually has been invited to do training at the FBI Chronicle. So we are very, very serious about making sure we have our diversity and inclusion training when it comes to the LGBTQ community. Absolutely. We embrace them. We love them.
Any others before we move toward closing statements around this issue of what's your message to the LGBT community? What can they expect from you and your officers under your administration?
To be treated fairly and equal. I made the comment earlier that people don't want to be treated special. They just want the basic rights that the Constitution gives them. Equality is one of them. I loved what Elaine said about having a liaison. We have one here in Dallas. I don't know if we have one in Columbus, but we will if I'm the chief. That's crucial to have those direct lines of communication. It just has a profound effect on your whole relationship in a positive way.
One of the things that's going to happen if I'm the successful candidate is the development of diversity, inclusion, and equity strategy. And with mission statements, goals and objectives, and ensuring that the policies, procedures, and protocols that we utilize out there on the street are not being hampered, and we're having the desired and achieving the desired results based on that strategy. This is such an important issue to me that I will guarantee that someone on my executive staff, one of the assistant chiefs, will be held responsible for ensuring that strategy is taken care of and it's intended with desired results so we can have diversity, equity, and inclusion, both internally within the department and externally in the community.
Love it. So folks, we're gonna get ready to leave it there. It's been as you could have imagined, a quick conversation. It went by really fast, but we got a lot covered, so much more we could cover. And so I know that you will be continuing in this process, and a lot of the questions that have been submitted will be probably posted to you privately via other processes. I will give you all 1 minute closing statements in just a moment, just to say farewell to the audience for now and to share anything that you didn't get a chance to do that. And then I'll come behind you with an official close from there. Avery, I'll start with you.
Hey, you see, you didn't have to tell me to unmute, right?
You got it.
So again, family, thank you so much for this opportunity. I recognize that this is a very, very difficult decision, as it should be. Columbus is looking for a unique chief that has a unique set of skills. I, Avery Moore, am that chief. I'm trustworthy. I'm a guardian. I'm a protector. And I believe in treating people correct, fair, with righteousness and dignity. I would love to be your chief because I believe in we. I believe that we can make Columbus the safest city in America, where other police departments, other cities look at us and say, how did y'all do that? And we can proudly say we have a U and an S at the end of Columbus, us. We did it together. So thank you.
Thank you, Avery. Elaine, I'll let you pick up there with your closing statement.
Absolutely. Again, thank you for this opportunity. And it's been very, very enlightening to even listen to the other panelists. If I am the chief, I will make a promise to you. I am relentless. I'm a problem solver. I'm a critical thinker. And I am absolutely going to come in and hit the ground, boots to the ground running to make sure that we do everything that we can to increase our community interactions. We're going to decrease our crime. We're going to increase our morale in the police department. And we're going to do that as a family together. So I just thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to meeting all of you.
Yvonne?
If I'm selected as Columbus's chief, I promise you that our organization will be a learning organization, that we will learn from our wins, but most importantly, from our failures, so that they don't continue to repeat over and over again. And the way that we're going to give communities the police department that they demand and deserve is through transparency and trust. We will be transparent in what we do and the decisions that we make and the policies that we create. And we're going to do that by building trust and having you engage in our process with us so that we do create the police department that Columbus can be proud of and stand behind. Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. Derek, I'll give you the last word.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of this forum. My law enforcement career is built on achieving excellence through implementing modern policing techniques. I have the discipline, focus, and experience necessary to bring the Columbus Division of Police to a place of transparency and trust in our communities. I expect the best from our men and women in blue every day. A proven track record of success doesn't stop me from continuing to learn and grow in every law enforcement position I've held. Actually, it sets the bar higher. Many have asked me why Columbus, especially coming back to Ohio from Florida. Ohio is where my heart is. It's where I grew up and spent most of my professional career. Beyond that, I see opportunity. The opportunity to enact meaningful, lasting change to a department that is struggling with legacy issues. Among the hurt and heartbreak surrounding the national debate on use of force, there has never been such a transformational time in policing. I want to repair that disconnect between law enforcement and community of color. I have a son, and I also have a grandson. Not only am I passionate about the gains that can be achieved using 21st century policing techniques, I care about affecting change for future generations. Trust and transparency, violence reduction, compassion for those on all sides of an issue. Change starts here with us. and your decision-making process today. Working with staff, community members, police review boards, and union representatives under my leadership, we will tackle these issues together, using a modern and statistic-based approach for violence reduction while creating lasting positive interactions with the law enforcement community. We are well positioned for success. I am
We're gonna have to cut it there, sir.
Police, drawing on my 4 decades of professional law enforcement experience. I'll never be done listening, learning, and acting with integrity to bring trust and transparency to my profession, no matter what community I serve. Columbus,
All
thank you
right.
very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you to all of the candidates, Avery Moore, Derek Diggs, Elaine Bryant, Yvonne Roman. Thank you so much for being here. To Columbus, we know that this is not the end of the process, but thank you for your thoughtful questions, your comments and concerns. We have all of them documented, and we want these candidates to continue to engage in dialogue. Over the next several days, many of you will be tapped about your perspectives coming off of this town hall, and so we hope you will engage with members of our city leadership in those conversations. To the candidates, I will say to you personally, good luck, and hopefully that all of you will find either this opportunity or another one to really make real change throughout our nation and country. Thank you to all of our city officials and to our mayor for hosting tonight's town hall, and to all of my Columbus residents and families. We will see you soon. Take care.
Thank you.